short introduction.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Vice President, мы решили по-английски, потому что... Здрасте, привет. Потому что если кому-то будет там тяжело и так далее и тому подобное, не стесняйтесь, спрашивайте. We decided to do it all in English for two reasons. First, and that was almost a story, when Hans Roslin who I'm quite sure will be, if he has not been already, a big hero with you. And once again, representing Ukrainian Channel 1, I'm very happy that we have your visit within the framework of cooperation between Channel 1 and Shevchenka University. The floor is all yours. The students and professorship is all yours, sir.
Thank you very much. This was the world 50 years ago. I was 12 years old. I remember my teacher told me there were 3 billion people in the world, and these are the country bubbles of the world. We use the countries of today, so Ukraine has its own bubble, although at this time it was part of the Soviet Union. And what I'm showing here is size of bubble is population size. The big one is obviously China. This is India. The one up there is United States of America. The colors here show the place where they are placed in the world. You can see the brown one is Europe. Europe actually is on several continents. Few remember that Greenland is also part legally of Europe because it's part of Denmark. What I'm showing here is my classical 2 pet indicators. Family size, 1 child, 3 children, 5, 7, 8 children per woman. Large families, small families. And on this axis, I show the length of life. 20 years life expectancy. This is how long you can expect to live at birth that year in the country if things were to remain the same. 40 years, 60 years, 80 years. You see some countries here had only 30 years to 40 years life expectancy. This was actually China down at the bottom. This was when Mao Zedong has done the terrible experiment of the Great Leap Forward that became a famine of the type that Ukraine experienced in the 1930s. Terribly wrong central planning. It was repeated again in China 30 years later. Here you find India, you find the Middle East, you find Latin America. You see that the world had 2 types of countries. Isn't it very clear? There are 2 clusters. One cluster here which had large families and short life. And one cluster up there which had small families and long life. Question is, where was Ukraine? Which of these bubbles were Ukraine? 1960. Was Ukraine down here among the poor countries? No, that was Turkey. Was Ukraine here in between? No, that was Kazakhstan. Was Ukraine here lagging behind? No, that's Portugal. Ukraine was on top of the world. Switzerland and Ukraine was together. Can you see? Switzerland, Ukraine, Switzerland, Ukraine. Very advanced modern countries with family sizes. I can mark this one. I can mark this one here. No, that was Switzerland. It's almost the same. You see, 1960 Ukraine. Very interesting, on this map here. That means that the size of family was just 2.4 children per woman. Nice family size, isn't it? You have enough children to be happy, not too many, you can take care of them. How long was the Ukrainians were living? More than 70 years on average. This was good life in Ukraine. It was after the bad planning economy. The agricultural output, even in the planning economy, was decent. Industrialization has started. In fact, is this statistic reliable? Yes, it is. The basic demographics in the Soviet system was quite reliable. They were quite reliable. There was death and birth registration going on. And this was 1960, was a relatively peaceful period. So Ukraine was on top of the world. Which other countries were on top of the world? Well, United States of America had 1 year less of life than Ukraine. They had more children. Argentina was down there. Italy didn't live as long as the Ukrainians. Spain was there. Japan had a shorter life than Ukraine, but they had less children already. It's quite interesting. I really noted this morning in the studio when we were looking that this was the year when Ukraine relatively had reached very far. And it was because the Soviet system, as I understood, gave the opportunity for schooling for everyone and basic health service for everyone and some access to family plan. You know, it was that period. Now, what has happened in the world since then? I put this you. These developing countries have changed? Yes, they have. They have changed enormously. And what I'm going to show you now is the animation statistics that I have had greatest impact with. Because I'm crushing the idea that the world still consists of industrialized countries and developing world. Or some would call Western world and developing countries. But just Western world, no, that's a very vague concept. No one ever defines what it is. Is it scientifically defined? Is it economically defined? Is it politically defined? Is it difference between Western country and the West during the Cold War? It's very vague. It should never be used in universities because it has no definition. If I go to Mexico, I go to Argentina, are they part of the Western world? Naturalmente, no somos Occidente. We are the West. Chile, they pick so many Nobel Prizes in literature. Latin America is a very prominent representative of the Western culture. Very, very prominent. Is Russia Western world? Yeah, Western culture. Tchaikovsky, Dostoevsky, some of the best composers, the best novelist in the Western culture is Russia. So it has become an ethnicity of some few countries to use the term Western without having to define it. But industrialized, I would agree, 1960. That was quite clear. Ukraine was heavily industrialized already in 1960. With a high energy use per capita. With quite good infrastructure in road and rail. So has this changed? Yes, it has changed enormously. I will slow down this so we will enjoy the last 50 years of the world in slow motion. Here we go. You can see 61, 62, see China is regaining its position. This is Brazil, this is Mexico moving there. This is the Latin American Catholic countries. They go for family planning. They don't care about the Pope. They do what they want in their bedroom. Here is China moving over to 2-child families. India is following. This is Indonesia. Look at Bangladesh, the Muslim country coming there, moving to smaller families. And now Arab countries, so everyone starts with family planning. Everyone gets smaller families. And in the 90s, they all go up to this corner. This is the HIV epidemic, the AIDS in Africa that drags down life expectancy. And they move up to this corner. And there you see, there we are today. A completely different world. Really different world. But still, down here, Afghanistan. If you are ruled by Talibans that love the medieval ages, you will stay in the medieval ages. Congo, a country rich in natural resources but broken down by civil war and conflict. Not moving at all as some other African countries are doing, which are already up here. And there's even an African country there, Mauritius. It's up here. Now, the interesting thing, or the sad thing, or for a foreigner, the surprising thing is the course of Ukraine. Ukraine is, of course, still up here. But instead of being on top of the successful, it has taken one bottom corner. Ukraine has taken a bottom corner, and Ukraine is now in this position there, together with Russia, yes indeed, and together with Belarus. It's quite interesting. These statistics comes out from completely different places, and yet it shows almost the same thing for countries which should be almost the same, because they share culture, they share history, they share economic realities. And that actually talks for the validity of it. Very few children per woman, 1.4, 1.3, 1.2. And the life expectancy that is lower today than 50 years ago. It's actually gone down to this, and up on this top here is Japan. Japan, 83 years. Now it's very difficult to beat Japan in life expectancy because the women haven't started smoking and they don't even drink vodka. So they're very difficult to beat, you know. Even Sweden, with all our success, we have too much vodka. We have got away with the tobacco, but the vodka is so deep into the culture, you know. It's impossible to get it out, you know. And the only thing that has happened with great gender equity, which you like, Andrei, is that the women are also drinking today. Yeah, they're drinking today. So that's the shift. The men didn't stop much, but the women catched up. So we can't compete with Japan. This is a sad, I'm making joke about the sad social reality of my country. Social advancement, economic advancement does not take down a heavy culture of alcoholism, a problem which we share, our two countries. And if you go into bad times, alcoholism will be a bigger burden. If you go into good times, it will be a little less of a burden, but it's still the major public health problem of Sweden. It's too much alcohol. The Swedish students, they can afford to go to Switzerland and France for alpine skiing for the holidays, but the hotels doesn't want them because they go mad there. Because in Sweden you can only buy alcohol in state-regulated shops. And they come to France and they can buy alcohol Friday night, they get drunk, they destroy the hotel. They don't want to have them back. It has been a repeated problem over the last 10 to 20 years. That's so much about it. But otherwise you can see how most of the world is actually up here. And many people who are worried about the environment and population growth in the world, they say the world population keeps growing. That is soon going to end. Because when you get so few children per woman, it won't grow. I will show you the data on world population, what has happened. We are working on developing a tool. This is a prototype I'm showing you, where we have simplified the population pyramid, and we can do it even more here. I can take it in 15-year groups, and I take the world backwards to 1960, when we started. Here I have 0 to 15 years, 15 to 30, 30 to 45, 45 to 60, and then my group up here, 60 to 75, you know, and the even older up there. And in 1960, there were most of the world population was children. Then it was young adults. Then it was adults. And I was a very rare group at that time. Old people like me were rare at that time. Andrei, you are in this group, isn't it?
I'm afraid.
Yes, you're afraid. Oh, that's not so bad. No, it's worse when you come up, you know. Wait for next floor. It will be worse. My students often tell me when I tell them to be entrepreneurs, to go on in research, they say like this, no, I won't succeed, I'm too young, they say. That's not a problem. That problem will solve itself. It's much worse to be old. Andrei is already nervous, you know. So when you're young, that's really when you can achieve something, you know, because things can change in front of you. And that you are not experienced, you don't have the contact, that will solve itself. You will get old, be sure. Now, what happened with the world population? Remember at this time, 1960, there were many children born per woman in the world. We had 6 children per woman in most of the developing world. So when I move forward here to 1965, 1970, 1975, you see what happens? The number of children keeps increasing. Because the women in this age group are giving birth to more than 2 children. They are giving birth to 4, to 3. The average in the world is 4. And it keeps increasing to 85. The world population has reached 5 billion now. And we continue 95. Now something happens. Look at the children there. It doesn't increase any longer. Can you see? The number of children in the world has stopped growing. The number of children in the world has stopped growing. It's increasing a little. That's where we are today. How come? How can that stop growing when we had so many countries? Afghanistan, Congo, the African countries, Yemen, which have 5 to 6 children per woman, because these countries are fully compensated by all the countries over here that has less than 2 children per woman. Ukraine being one of them. So that means that in the total world, we don't get more children any longer. But we still have population growth. How come? Because children will become like you. And you will become like Andre, and he will become like me. You will grow older. That's why we have population growth in the world. Look here at another prototype I'm working on. This is just to show you how the world looked like. Vietnam. Buddhists in Vietnam on the small motorbike. Father and mother, 2 children. Muslims in Bangladesh. They have afforded a bicycle. 2 children. Mexico, Catholics. They are building their own house. The world is full of 2-child families. It's the most common family in the world. Doesn't matter if they are Buddhists, Muslims, or Catholics. The religious leaders are not in the bedroom. It's in the bedroom you make the children. So it's very interesting. This is many say, oh, it's just because China, Mao Zedong had that one-child policy. No, there's one part of the China where Mao Zedong didn't reach. There's one group of people in China where Mao Zedong had no power, but it's now a part of China. Which one is it? It's Hong Kong. So it's interesting to see how many children per woman they have in Hong Kong. It's the only place that has 1.01. So it's not that people go into the bedroom, they hug each other, they read Mao Zedong and say, no, only one child. This is not how they do in the bedroom. They do it in a completely different way. And you have quite a good idea how they do it. So this with small families is something decided in the bedroom, and it's very little political leaders can do about it by directly affect. There must be some political leader in this country that tell you to have more children, isn't it?
Not at the time.
Not at the time. You will get it soon. Putin has been telling the Russian people to get more children. He cannot affect when they do it in the bedroom, but he can change the general situation in the country so you get more children. I can show you Sweden. It's quite interesting with Sweden. I always see young people are always interested about bedrooms. I don't know why. If we just look at Sweden and Ukraine, this is 1950s. Ukraine had not reached the low number of children of Sweden, but then Ukraine and Sweden were almost the same, and that Ukraine went down there and Sweden went up there. It's very interesting. Can you see how Sweden go down here to about 1.6 children, then they go up from 1.2.0, then they go down, and then they go up again. And the general tendency we have now is an increase in children in the richest, socially most favorable countries in Northwest Europe. That means if life is decent, if you have a chance to work as a woman, even if you get children, you love children. You are going to get 2, you are going to get 3. I have presently 7 grandchildren. And this means that you get an increase, you get a lower fertility. In fact, to a certain extent, Ukraine, Belarus here is at the bottom of fertility, the sort of lowest fertility we have in the world. It's educated, highly capable people that has economical and social constraints and make a choice to have few children so that those kids can have this is what you see very clearly. Now, what does it mean for the world population? I was there and I was going to show it to you here. This is 1960. We were 3 billion. 1 billion was children, 1 billion was young adult, 1 billion was little older adults. People like me hardly was so few, we don't have to count them. Then, 25 years later, this happened. We got more children and we got older adults. Huh? The Andrei group was added. Huh? The Andrei group was added. Still, me up there in grey was not there. But then number of children did not increase, so we had this. This was to 2011. My group was added there, and these became older. The next 2 billion, we will be 7 billion this year. The next 2 billions will just be these two. Now, how come? How come? Will not Africa change the world population? No, probably not. Probably not. Because the children in Africa will not be so many. You can see here, if we look at Ukraine first. Ukraine is there, and we go back to... I have to make full screen. That's why it's not there. Ukraine 1960, 65, 70, 80, 90, and here the lack of children. Huh? So you have under 15. You have 1, 2, 3, 4. How come the number of children is not increasing? When the Ukraine children will turn adult at the age of 15, 4 Ukrainian children will be replaced by 3 Ukrainian babies and 1 Congolese baby. You understand how it is? There are some countries which have fewer children will be compensated by those who have more children. The big thing is not, it's the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, and it's China, which already is at this low situation. So Ukraine is not so alone in this situation. It's more that it's surprising that your country is still in this situation. That one would have expected, from just an outsider's view, that by now the transition would have happened. And you would be on economic growth, and you would see the fertility rate starting to climb again in Ukraine. But this is more or less where Ukraine is. If I look at China, here, China from 1960, you see, same sort of pattern. Not even China is replacing their own, they have fewer. Why the population in China is growing, they still don't have people like me up here. That's what they are adding. They have more children than people like me, only twice as many children as people like me. So that's why the population is still growing in China. It takes a long time to change population. Population change very slowly. And unfortunately, your country will have to live with the past demographic experience for 50 years to come. These Ukrainians will not appear later. They will, when they come up here, they will be less people. So the unemployment will be less. But the burden to take care of the old people, you already have more people in my age group than you have in the children's age group. Remember China? They also had less children, but they had even less old people. This is why we see an advantage of the Asian tiger economies. When they move into the modern world, and they get few children, they get what seems to be a population situation like yours, they still have few old people. You will have a lot of old people which you have to honor because they were your grandmothers and your grandfathers, which fought for you, which struggled to help your parents forwards in the situation, and there are quite many. And when you calculate economic, what that means with health system, it's a challenge. You need to grow your economy so much that you can get immigrants. You need to have immigrants down here, which will solve this issue, which Italy is having. Italy was also having a similar population situation here. We shall look at Italy. It's also a relatively big country. So 1980, 1990, La Famiglia in Italy. Same pattern again. So that means that even at a completely different economical level from Ukraine, the demographic pattern is the same in Italy. Whereas in Sweden, somewhere here, much more favorable, much more stable. So why, it's not the economic, so why does Sweden get more children than Italy? Is it because we are more sexy? Don't laugh so much for that joke. It seems to be the funniest joke you have heard. What is it that makes Italy unable to get children to replace the population? Berlusconi, yes. Not Berlusconi, but the policy stands for. There is no transferal of resources from those who doesn't have children to those who have children. There is not subsidizing daycare center. There's no right for parental leaves. There is not taking care of the old people in the way that Sweden is doing. That means that these burdens falls on the shoulders of the Italian women, and they say, enough. I'll have one child, that is enough. Because I have to take care of this husband, I have to take care of this child, I have to take care of my parents-in-law. I can't do more. But if you use your economy and you transfer to it, you get kids. Basically, it's not as simple as that. There's a value part of it also, and that is what we call the cohort effect. When you delay getting children at the age of 18 to 23, and you move it to 36 to 42, that is 15 years when you get the low fertility rate. And I think that when the fertility rate will start climbing in Ukraine again, it's not that 18 to 23-year-old women get children. It's when 35 to 45-year-old women get children. The second child or the first and second child. That's what would happen. So we have that period when it falls down. Now, this is the world situation about the population. Where is these people situated? Where are they situated? I would like to show you that, but I didn't have that here, so I should go. Global show, IKEA Poznan. I was lecturing for IKEA yesterday. This is the world, 2011. Oh, sorry. 1 billion lives in Europe, 1 billion lives in Africa, 1 billion in America, and 4 billion in Asia. The world has become normal again. The world was always an Asian world for the last 8,000 years. It was dominated by population in Asia. That's why we have a lot of people in India and China, because the Indian and Chinese agricultural-based civilizations were successful thousands of years ago. That's when they grow their population. What will happen the next years? The next years, and I count up to 2050, when I will be 102 years old and expect to live. There will be 1 billion more there will be 1 billion more in Africa. And if I divide North America, North and South, and if I divide Europe according to the economic divide we still have today, between the former West, which have a high income, and the former Soviet Union bloc, which still have a low income. Actually, what has been labeled the Western world, I call it the Old West, that's only 1/9 of the population of the world. It's a very small part of the world. And the world will be very, very much based in the rest. So Brazil, Russia, India, China, BRIC, and next 11, which Goldman Sachs is having. That's the world. So instead of the developing world, I have a new term. I call it the world. That's where the people live. The old West is someone with an identity crisis which is growing. So what does it mean when I talk about this economic development? Let me go down here. We've now looked at population and fertility. So I would like to look at, here we have the world. I still have life expectancy on this axis, how long you live. But now I start 1800. 1800, that is 211 years ago. We have compiled the best available historical data that exists. It's of course very weak, but an estimate where countries were. And this is income per person here, $1,000, $10,000, $100,000. In purchasing power parity dollars, inflation adjusted over 210 years. It's an heroic thing to do, and universities doesn't do it. This is what museums do. When museums are going to show a dinosaur skeleton, and one leg is missing from the dinosaur skeleton, because a river took that leg away 10,000 years ago, you don't display a dinosaur skeleton with 3 legs. Because the children will go home and tell their parents, we saw a dinosaur, they only have 3 legs. What do? You put a plastic leg, isn't it? Because it makes it understand. We put a lot of plastic leg in this data set. We put a lot of plastic leg to make it understandable, to make the overview impression correct. Huh? So what happened was 1800 already. Richest in the world were United Kingdom, second was the Netherlands, third United States, fourth Germany, fifth Belgium, you know. And where did we have our countries here? Ukraine estimated more or less there, not too bad of a place at that time. And if you hit Ukraine between the wars and between the occupation, it was always a fertile land which could produce surplus of food. To me, when I look at your history, it seems that your problem is the security. It's the nation state and the occupation and the turnaround of the history with short intervals. Sweden then is, we don't have any soil that can compare to yours, but we are up in the north there and we are pretty alone and no one occupies us. So we were there, we weren't as good 1800, we were nothing good in historically. And what happened with the world is interesting, because when industrialization started, these countries got richer and richer, but they didn't get as healthy. Still 1880, life expectancy was just 40 years. It was horrible times, you know. Cholera was just being brought under control with safe water. But tuberculosis was rampant. Children were dying in measles, you know. Lot of problems were. And then gradually money got better, research and medical technology got better. So we got this world, after the 2 world wars, we had this sort of divided world. The successful world up here, Latin America that tried to follow, and most of the world down here. The other countries were successful when they gained their independence. Now I think that's also when you look at Ukraine's history. It's good to be independent. Or if you are part of a big empire and you are considered a poor part of that empire, that's one thing. But if you are a peripheral part of that empire, or run as a colony, that's something. Look how these countries moved up. Straight up. And then they got richer and richer. It's most clearly when you compare the United States and China. To compare United States and China. We go back into history. And we can see how China comes nowhere. And United States get richer and richer. China hasn't done anything for the first 150 years. Then Mao Zedong brings health and literacy and electricity to China. And then Deng Xiaoping brings money to China. And now they got it. And to our surprise, we find today that China has even bypassed. If we look at Ukraine in this development also, you can see that Ukraine's development This is the terrible 1943. And here, see how the country 1990 go down and backwards, meet China there, and then don't catch up with China's express thought going here. In fact, if I split China, Shanghai is almost catched up with the average of the United States. And this is the world today. It has been called a flat world. Tom Friedman in New York Times called this a flat world because he's so surprised to find very good software programmers in India where they can earn a lot of money on services. India is a country that is jumping from the agricultural economy to the service economy, almost bypassing the industrial part, where China is heavily industrialized. And you can see what we have here in the middle is now emerging economies. The countries which have not been part of that coherent group of Western economies always helped each other and tried to make life tough for those who were outside by tariffs and all sorts of things. Now we have most of the growth here. But Ukraine, again, is like in demography. You are in the bottom corner. You used to be in the upper corner of that middle group. You are now in the bottom corner of that middle group. But going in the right direction, but not as fast as those who are in neighboring positions. This is more or less the situation we have in the world. And there is no Western world and developing world. There are countries all the way, and down here is Congo, and down there is Afghanistan. And here is Vietnam. Look how successful Vietnam is. They are healthier than Ukraine today. And they are growing fast, If you just look at Vietnam and Ukraine, they're relatively good data. There's some weaknesses with this data, but it's relatively good. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic what Vietnam has done here. And Ukraine, of course, the last years here, the last year going in the right direction now, whereas sadly this 2009 was one big step backwards. But that is turning around now. Now, has the world understood this? Well, I claim, where was I now? I should go down there, I think. This is the Gapminder world map. It can be downloaded freely from our website, and you can print it. And we have a Creative Commons license. That means that you're allowed to print it and sell it and earn money. As long as you just say it's buy, it's come from Gapminder. This is a new strategy on how you launch. If you print and sell that, you pay for the posters for our website, and you're welcome to do so. It's a sort of it doesn't make sense to charge for digital material where the cost for an additional user is zero. You have to find more clever business models to expand on the internet. Now, these one are high-income countries, these one are middle-income countries, these one are low-income countries, these one are collapsed countries. Congo, Afghanistan down there. And people are indeed grasping that it's not two worlds any longer. And I will emphasize this by doing something that may surprise you. I will honor the American president. Not the present president, but the last one. It's George W. Bush who did something very good on the 15th of November, 2008. Here he was. Can you see him? He has a headache. In 2008 he had a headache. You could really feel pity. They called him a lame duck because not even McCain wanted him to come to his campaign for running, Everyone said that he had failed, And then he got this crisis. Now I admire politicians, not those politicians who achieve their goals, but those who are going in the wrong direction and they are realizing it and they change. Just imagine de Klerk in South Africa, who were defending apartheid. And then he said, no, apartheid is no good. I go and talk with Nelson Mandela. I admire Gorbachev. He was running communism and said, this won't work in the future. We have to change it. He could have changed it in a better way, perhaps. But he realized and he went another direction. And George Bush did almost the same thing. He said, Greenspan, no good. First he loved Greenspan, and he said that this letting the market forces run the economy, that would work. He deregulated too much. And then he blew it. So why you suffered 2009 was because he shot himself in the foot. This crisis came undoubtedly from America. Then different countries had done the same problem with their real estate or with their economy, more or less. So what did he do? Well, he had this Lehman headache. Lehman Brothers had gone down, you know. So he needed money. And he said, you know, government often need money. So he grabbed for his pocket. It was absolutely no money. It was empty. He even had a hole in the pocket. He had lowered the taxes so much, so he started the crisis with a debt. And what do you do when you don't have money? You ask your contacts. You ask your brothers and friends. So his brothers and friends were called G7. So he asked G7, oh, Western friends, you know, do you have some money? No. Britain said, we have Northern Rock, we have the same crisis. I must save Opel, Merkel said. I must save Renault, Sarkozy said. And the Japanese guy here said, no, Japan has no money any longer, you know. And so they did what? You have no money, you have a hole in your pocket and your friends can't help you. So what did he do then? He phoned a Latino trade union socialist leader. That's painful for a Republican president in America. To phone, and he said, Mr. Lula da Silva, does Brazil have any money? Yes, Lula said. Can you lend us some of that money? Yes, he said. Can you come to Washington and discuss the conditions? Yes, but then I want to sit in the board of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. So Bush decided not to invite his normal gang, the G7. He said, I have to invite everyone who runs a big economy. And he invited to the G20 meeting in Washington. This is the G20 meeting, 15th of November 2008. And look how happy he is now. He's now smiling. The headache is gone. But it's very funny. He's standing here. He has a Muslim there, King Abdullah. He has Jintao, the communist there, and he has the socialist there. So, but can you see he's leaning? He's like leaning to the socialist because I think he's very emotional. George W. Bush was not so analytical. He was more emotional man. He said, this guy, you know, he ran an election. He won the presidency in an open democratic election. He's more like me. But that's not so clever because he didn't have so much money. The big money is here and here. This guy has 2.4. At this time, he had 2.4 trillion US dollar. Do you know how much China saves? China do this business. They produce a lot of products. They pay for the raw material. They pay for the salaries. They pay the profit to the investors. And then they sell it. And then they buy less products. So they get an exchange reserve. So every day they gave an excess of 1 billion US dollar. It's quite a lot of money. 1 billion US dollar a day. You know Bill and Melinda Gates? They're also people I admire because they give their money to the very poorest people for their health service. They give every year 3 billion US dollar. The biggest philanthropic donation in the history. How much is that in China? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You know, it's very important to understand the magnitude of the world today. And the Iraq war cost the taxpayers in U.S. average over the year about 70 billion a year. That's January, February, March in China. China can operate 4 wars of that size without running into a debt. U.S. ran 1 war and then 1.5 war, and they are into deep debt. It's very interesting that the democratic countries in West Europe and North America are running into debts that can match the ones you are struggling with in your country. With all the potential of avoiding it. The fully developed democratic system doesn't avoid that. So here Bush was standing, but this meeting is not a joke what I'm saying. It was really the right thing he did. He did it quite speedy. Kevin Rudd, the Australian Prime Minister, helped to advise him quite much. The history has not been written. You know, these big things, what really happened will take us 10 to 20 years to know.